In a rain-soaked park, a black boy finds it hard to pull a girl in a wheelchair out of the mud. The crowd gathers around, but no one helps. When the girl's billionaire father arrives, he angrily scolds the boy, thinking he hurt his daughter, but then he realizes the truth and apologizes. The boy doesn't know that his small act of kindness will change his life forever. The next day, the billionaire shows up at his door with an offer that brings the boy to tears. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from and subscribe because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The rain had been falling steadily all morning, painting Brookdale Park in shades of gray and brown, a quiet, relentless drizzle that soaked the earth and made every path a treacherous stretch of mud. Tiny rivulets formed in the grooves of the worn cobblestones, reflecting the pale, sullen sky above. It was the sort of day when laughter seemed reluctant to emerge, when even birds hesitated before taking flight. But for 10-year-old Ava Jonas, this rain carried a far greater weight than anyone could see. It was a trap, and she was caught in the very center of it. Her wheelchair had sunk into the thick, clinging mud, the wheels spinning uselessly, each rotation just deeper embedding her tires in the muck. Ava's small hands gripped the brakes desperately, fingers trembling, wet from both rain and panic. "Miss Cooper. Please, help me," she called out, her voice higher than usual, strained and cracking, carrying across the slick, empty paths. "I can't get out. I'm stuck." Miss Cooper, her nanny, was supposed to be Ava's guardian, her protector, but today she was somewhere else entirely, fingers tapping frantically on a glowing phone screen under the shelter of a half-drenched gazebo. She barely glanced up. "Ava, I hear you," she said, her tone clipped, more irritation than reassurance. "I'm busy. Stop yelling." Ava's eyes darted around the park, hoping for someone, anyone, to notice, to stop, to help. A man in a crisp gray suit jogged past, earbuds in, focused entirely on the rhythm of his steps, nodding to himself as if the world had shrunk to the space between his feet. A young couple, laughing at something on a phone, stepped carefully around her, smirking at the mud on their shoes. Even a trio of businessmen, talking rapidly, their words indistinct but sharp, strode past without slowing. Ava's shouts echoed back at her, swallowed by the misty park, each unanswered call a small cut to her chest. She felt a twist of anger, sharp and bitter, mixed with something worse, loneliness. She thought of her father, David Jonas, and the mansions, the cars, the endless wealth. They had given her everything she could want in material terms, but here she was, unseen, stuck in mud like a forgotten toy, and no one, not even the people meant to care for her, seemed to notice. She realized with a piercing ache that perhaps wealth did not protect her from the very human experience she feared most, being invisible. The mud tugged at her wheels, greedy and unyielding, and a small sob escaped her lips. Rain soaked her curls plastered to her forehead, ran down her cheeks, and stung her eyes. Her hands were raw from gripping the brake, her arms shaking from exertion. She tried to pivot, tried to push, tried to lift, but it was no use. Each effort only made her more stuck, and with every passing stranger who ignored her, the hopelessness built a heavy wall around her heart. And then, just as the weight of it all pressed down on her, cold, wet, alone, and overlooked, somewhere in the distance, beyond the fog of mist and rain, a pair of boots splashed into view, moving with determination. A boy. Not rich, not wearing a suit, but moving with purpose. Ava didn't know it yet, but this boy's arrival would become the hinge on which her world tilted. The hinge that would open a door to something she had forgotten existed, hope. The boy's name was Liam Johnson, and he had known struggle for as long as he could remember. At 15, he already carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, or at least the part that could not be ignored, his grandmother, Ruth. She was small, fragile, but fierce in her own way, her heart condition a constant shadow over their modest apartment. Every day, Liam worked, sometimes 2 jobs in a single stretch, just to make sure she had her medicine, her food, and a moment of comfort. He was tired in ways that wealth could never fix. He was exhausted in ways that only responsibility could inflict. And yet, here he was, sprinting across the rain-soaked paths of Brookdale Park. His shoes squelched in the mud with each step. His uniform, the one piece of clothing that still made him feel like he belonged somewhere, was soaked through, sticking to his back and arms. The risk was obvious: one wrong step, and these shoes, his only good pair, would be ruined. The uniform would be a mess, drenched and muddy. And yet, Liam ran faster. His heart beat with a rhythm of urgency, not for himself, but for the small, helpless girl ahead. He saw her clearly now. 10 years old. Struggling. Alone. Her wheelchair stuck, her small arms straining, her face streaked with rain and mud. And though his mind immediately calculated all the consequences, punished by his boss for being late, scolded for ruining clothes, potentially getting sick, his feet did not stop. Because some things were bigger than fear, bigger than pride, bigger than exhaustion. Compassion, Liam had learned early, was one of them. "Hold on," he called, his voice carrying over the drizzle. Not a shout, not a demand, but an offering, a lifeline. Ava's head snapped toward him, eyes wide, a flicker of relief cutting through the panic. You're going to help?" she asked, hope almost trembling in her voice. "I'm going to get you out," Liam said, determination steady, even as he fought to keep his balance on the slick ground. His hands reached out and grasped the wheelchair, mud squelching under his fingers, sticky and stubborn. He tested it, felt the weight, the suction of mud, and grimaced. This wasn't going to be easy. Every movement was resistance, every step a battle against the grip of the earth. But Liam didn't hesitate. He planted his feet firmly, bent his knees, and lifted with steady strength. The chair groaned, the wheels spinning uselessly, and yet inch by inch, he began to free it. Ava's small hands clutched his arm, not just for help but for reassurance, as though she needed to remind herself he was real, that someone could be on her side. Her voice wavered. Are you sure you can do it?" "I have to," he said simply. And in that moment, there was no pride, no self-interest, no calculation, only the clear, unshakable need to do the right thing. Passers-by continued to ignore them. A man walking a golden retriever stepped around the mud as if it were lava, eyes fixed on his phone. A woman with an umbrella kept her pace, glancing briefly at the struggle, then looking away. The world seemed to have blurred into indifference. But Liam didn't falter. Not because he wanted recognition, but because he understood something rare at his age, that sometimes doing the right thing meant standing alone in the rain, risking everything, and expecting nothing in return. Another step. Then another. The chair finally gave way from the mud's stubborn grip. Liam shifted it, carrying Ava's weight carefully, balancing both her and the chair, feeling the squelch of mud against his sneakers. She clung to him with a mix of relief and fear, and for the first time in hours, maybe in days, she felt like someone saw her, not the little heiress, not the invisible child, but just Ava. And Liam, soaked, muddy, exhausted, felt something shift inside him too. The world hadn't stopped being hard. His responsibilities hadn't disappeared. But for this moment, he had done something that mattered. Something that counted. Something that could change the course of more than one life. It took effort, more than Ava or anyone else might have imagined. The mud resisted with greedy persistence, sucking at the wheels, clinging to Liam's shoes, coating his arms, turning every movement into a test of strength and patience. He gritted his teeth, sweat mixing with rain, and adjusted his grip, shifting Ava slightly forward, then backward, inch by careful inch. Ava's small voice wavered. It won't move. We're stuck." "Yes, we're stuck," Liam admitted, his voice steady even as his arms burned. "But not for long. You just hold on to me, okay?" She did, clutching him like a lifeline, fingers cold and trembling against his soaked sleeve. In that moment, she felt the strange, heart-stirring relief of being seen, being valued, not for what she owned, not for her father's fortune, but simply for being herself. Finally, after a series of careful lifts and nudges, a shuddering pull and a grunt of exertion, the wheelchair broke free from the mud. A slosh of brown water splattered Liam's pants, soaking him further, but he didn't care. He set the chair on firmer ground, mud sliding from the tires in thick clumps. Ava exhaled sharply, almost in disbelief, as if she could not yet trust that she was safe. You saved me," she whispered, eyes wide, cheeks streaked with tears and rain. "I told you I would," Liam said softly, letting a tired smile creep across his face. "You're safe now." For a moment, the rain seemed to lessen, or perhaps they were simply too absorbed in the relief to notice it. Ava hesitated, glancing around at the park, expecting someone, anyone, to applaud, to notice, to intervene. But nobody did. Joggers, couples, businessmen, all continued past them, absorbed in their own worlds, leaving the two soaked, muddy figures alone amidst the gray expanse. And that was when the weight of the world struck Ava in a new way. Tears welled up, not from fear or cold, but from the clarity of recognition, that she had been abandoned, not just by strangers, but by the very person charged with her care. Miss Cooper stood under the gazebo, phone in hand, an indifferent observer, unmoved by the rescue she had ignored. Ava felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and relief twist together into something complicated, something she had never felt before. "Miss Cooper," she said, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you help me?" The nanny's reply was almost mechanical. I was busy. You'll be fine now." Her eyes flicked to Liam, a brief flash of irritation crossing her face, but she said nothing further. Ava turned back to Liam, her chest heaving with emotion, and the small, stubborn glimmer of trust she had found in him solidified. "Thank you," she said again, louder this time, not just to acknowledge the rescue but to recognize that someone real, cared. Liam shrugged, trying to hide the soreness in his arms and the ache in his back. "Don't mention it," he said, but inside, he felt something shift. It was a small moment, and yet he understood its weight. Small acts of courage could ripple outward, far beyond the mud and rain, far beyond the immediate rescue. Sometimes, he realized, the smallest choices mattered most. Ava's gaze lingered on him. She wanted to say more, about the fear, the loneliness, the anger, but words failed her. Instead, she nodded, a silent acknowledgement of connection, of gratitude, of recognition that someone had crossed the boundary of indifference to offer her humanity. It was a moment that would stay with both of them forever, a moment before the storm of misunderstanding and confrontation, a moment when the simplest act, lifting a girl from the mud, carried the profound weight of compassion and the quiet courage of one who had nothing yet gave everything. And then, almost as if the world were impatient for its next chapter, a black luxury car pulled up to the edge of the park. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a man whose presence immediately commanded attention. He moved with the authority of someone used to control, to wealth, to unquestioned power. This man was David Jonas, Ava's father, and the story of the rescue, the quiet triumph of courage, was about to collide with the gravity of misunderstanding. David Jonas' footsteps crunched across the wet path, each one precise, deliberate, radiating authority. He reached the edge of the muddy clearing just as Liam set the wheelchair on firm ground. Rain slicked his designer coat, but his expression was sharp, controlled, a mix of fear and fury. For a moment, he simply took in the scene, the mud, the dripping boy, the soaked chair, and most of all, his daughter, alive but trembling. "What the hell is going on here?" David barked, voice sharp enough to slice through the rain. His gaze zeroed in on Liam with immediate suspicion. "Are you hurting her?" Liam froze, the chair still under his hands, the mud heavy on his shoes, and instinctively stepped between David and Ava. "No, sir. I'm helping her. She was stuck in the mud, and I." "Helping her?" David's voice rose, disbelief and instinctive protectiveness mingling in a tense, dangerous edge. "You think I don't know what people like you are capable of? Step away from my daughter." Ava's eyes widened. She could feel the storm brewing, not the rain, but her father's anger, and her own voice, quiet yet urgent, pushed itself through the fear. "Dad! Wait! Stop!" she called, and for the first time, David paused, looking down at her small, soaked frame. "He didn't hurt me. He saved me. Nobody else did, not even Miss Cooper. He helped me when I was stuck in the mud." The word struck David like a sudden blow, cutting through layers of instinct and suspicion. He looked at Liam, the mud, the wet clothes, the earnest exhaustion in the boy's eyes, and his anger wavered for a fraction of a second. "Saved you?" he repeated, disbelief laced with confusion. "Explain yourself. Now." Liam swallowed hard, heart pounding, arms trembling from the effort of the rescue. "Yes, sir." She was stuck. The mud was deep. People were walking by, ignoring her. I didn't think anyone else would help. I had to do something. His voice faltered under David's intense gaze, but he stood his ground. "I had to help her." Ava's chest rose and fell rapidly, the rain dripping from her hair like tiny beads of relief. "It's true, Dad. Liam saved me." He didn't think about what he'd get, or what would happen to him. He just helped me. He didn't walk away. David's eyes, sharp and calculating as ever, softened slightly, just enough to betray the human beneath the billionaire armor. His jaw clenched as he realized something uncomfortable. He had been absent, not just physically, but emotionally. For 2 years, since the accident that had paralyzed his wife and left Ava in a wheelchair, he had buried himself in work, in deals, in numbers, and neglected the one thing money could never buy: presence. And now, looking at Liam, a boy with nothing, soaked and exhausted, helping his daughter when no one else would, David felt a rare, unsettling mixture of guilt and awe. Miss Cooper, sensing the shift in atmosphere, straightened and opened her mouth. "Sir, David's gaze cut through her, icy and final. "You did nothing. Do you understand that? Nothing. And that is why you are done. Pack your things." Ava blinked at him, her voice soft but firm, still dripping with rain. "Dad. I want Liam to stay. He's my friend. He saved me." David turned back to Liam. He studied the boy's mud-splattered uniform, the soaked sleeves, the exhaustion that radiated from every inch of him. And in that moment, something shifted, not just recognition of bravery, but a spark of understanding, a lesson he had long avoided. Sometimes, help comes from the least expected places. Sometimes, courage does not wear a suit. "Liam Johnson," he said, voice calmer now but still weighty, "you saved my daughter when no one else would. I don't know what you want, but I need to understand who you are, why you did this, and how I can," he paused, swallowing. "How I can make this right." Ava smiled through the rain, small but genuine. "He doesn't need anything, Dad. He just helped me. That's enough." Liam's chest tightened at the attention, at the recognition, at the rare validation that came from someone like David Jonas. For a boy who had spent his life in survival mode, whose days had been dictated by necessity and hardship, this moment was overwhelming in ways he could not yet articulate. And yet, amid the mud, the rain, and the tension, a fragile thread of connection began to form, a thread that would weave into something much larger, binding the lives of 3 people in ways none of them could yet foresee. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle now, but the tension in the muddy clearing remained, heavy and almost tangible. David Jonas stood over Miss Cooper, arms crossed, eyes sharp with judgment. "You were paid to protect her," he said, voice low but cutting. "And you did nothing. Nothing. Do you understand the weight of your negligence?" Miss Cooper stammered, trying to form an excuse, but no words could fill the emptiness of her failure. She nodded stiffly, guilt written in every line of her face. I thought she was safe." "Safe?" David's voice rose again, a whip crack of anger and grief. "Safe? She was stuck in the mud, calling for help, and you were too busy with your phone to notice. You are fired. Pack your things and leave. Now." Miss Cooper's lips pressed into a thin line. She knew there was no argument, no justification that could undo her neglect. She turned and walked away, the sound of her heels on the wet path a hollow echo against the quiet of the park. Ava's gaze followed her nanny's retreating back. Her hands, still gripping the wheelchair, shook slightly, not from exertion, but from a storm of emotions: relief, indignation, gratitude, and a sharp undercurrent of sadness. She looked at Liam, still standing beside her, dripping with rain and mud, and smiled faintly, a fragile thread of hope knitting itself into her chest. David turned slowly to Liam, whose expression had remained steady, though his pride and exhaustion were evident. The billionaire's eyes softened slightly as he took in the boy's soaked uniform, the mud-streaked hands, and the raw honesty in his gaze. "You saved her," he said again, quieter this time, almost to himself. "You saved my daughter when no one else would, including the people I trusted to protect her." Liam shrugged, shifting his weight, trying to hide the ache in his arms and the soreness in his back. "I just did what I thought was right," he said simply. His voice carried a humility that cut through the wealth and power surrounding them. "I didn't think about getting anything out of it. I just wanted her to be safe." David's jaw tightened. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that made him uncomfortable in ways money and authority had never managed. He had spent years building a world where control and transactions mattered more than presence and care. And now, standing in the rain, he realized that he had been missing the point entirely. Ava, sensing the unspoken conflict in her father, spoke again. "Dad. Liam didn't just help me. He cared. Nobody else even tried." Her voice was soft but firm, a rare clarity cutting through the tension. "He didn't care about your money, or mine, or what anyone thought. He just helped." David looked at her, then at Liam, then back at Ava. For the first time in years, he felt the sharp sting of his own absence, the way he had buried himself in work and missed the small, irreplaceable moments of being a father. And now, confronted with a boy who had nothing yet gave everything, he realized that his wealth, his status, his control, they meant nothing without presence, without heart, without action. Meanwhile, Liam's pride whispered in his mind. Offers of reward, praise, or assistance felt foreign, almost uncomfortable. He had always carried his responsibilities alone, shielded his grandmother from hardship, and now he stood before one of the richest men in the world, soaked and muddy, unsure how to navigate gratitude or generosity. It was Ruth, in the quiet moments of their lives, who had taught him the lesson he now needed most. Pride, she had said, could be both armor and prison. Refusing kindness out of pride was another form of harm. It could close doors, harden hearts, and prevent the very connection that made life meaningful. Liam knew those words now, though it would take more than reflection to act on them. Ava looked at the boy she had come to trust in minutes, and then at her father, whose gaze softened yet still carried the weight of authority. In that muddy park, soaked by rain, surrounded by silence and dripping trees, the threads of something new began to weave, a tentative, fragile trust, a recognition of courage and care, and the first steps toward transformation for all of them. David Jonas exhaled, a long, deliberate breath. "Liam Johnson," he said quietly, voice carrying a new weight, "you've shown more courage and compassion in these few minutes than many people I've known my whole life. I need to make this right, if you'll allow me." And for a moment, Liam simply stared, the idea of help, of recognition, of change, hovering before him like something both terrifying and miraculous. He had acted without expectation, and now, the consequences, the challenge of accepting kindness, the pull of pride, loomed large in his mind. But Ava's small, grateful smile reminded him why the struggle mattered. Sometimes, doing the right thing meant opening yourself to the possibility of transformation. The rain had finally slowed to a soft drizzle, a gentle patter against the leaves and the mud-slicked paths, and yet the tension in the park had not lifted. David Jonas, the billionaire father, had shifted from anger to contemplation, his eyes tracing every line of Liam's mud-spattered form, every droplet clinging to the boy's soaked uniform, every tremor of fatigue that spoke louder than words ever could. "Liam," David began, his voice quieter now, measured but firm, "I cannot undo what you have done today, nor can I erase the neglect that surrounds my daughter. But I can offer you a choice, a way to ensure that your actions today are not just a fleeting moment of courage, but the beginning of something more." Liam's heart thumped, his chest tightening. He had been here before, in moments of struggle and obligation, when he had to weigh personal pride against necessity. Offers from wealthy people were rarely about kindness, they carried strings, expectations, obligations. And yet, here was a man, Ava's father, extending an open hand, not as a test, but as an acknowledgement of bravery. David continued. I can offer you a full scholarship for your education. You can attend the best school in the city, a place where your mind and talents can flourish. He paused, letting the words sink in. I can offer you a paid internship at my company, should you choose to learn and contribute alongside us. And most importantly, medical coverage for your grandmother's condition, so that she can have the care she needs without fear. Liam's first instinct was to refuse. Pride, hard-earned and deeply rooted, whispered insistently in his mind. You earned everything you have on your own. You don't take charity. You don't let anyone owe you anything. He shifted uncomfortably, hands slick with mud, the weight of responsibility pressing him down as it always did. Ava, sitting quietly now in her chair, muddy and shivering, reached out and placed a small hand on his arm. Liam, she said softly, her voice steady despite the rain, you helped me without thinking of yourself. It's not wrong to let someone help you too. You don't have to carry everything alone. Her words struck him deeper than he expected. He looked into her eyes, seeing trust, gratitude, and a reflection of the courage he had shown. And then he thought of Ruth, waiting at home, fragile and strong all at once, relying on him day after day. He thought of the nights spent working multiple jobs, worrying that medicine or food would run out. He remembered his grandmother's steady voice, calm but firm, reminding him that refusing help out of pride was not strength, it was isolation. Ruth's words echoed in his mind, pride can be armor, yes, but it can also be a cage. Accepting kindness is not weakness, it is wisdom. Liam exhaled slowly, a long, deliberate breath. I don't usually accept help, he admitted, voice quiet but honest. But, if this can help my grandmother, and me, and maybe even Ava, then, he hesitated, letting the words find their way through the tangle of pride and gratitude. Yes. I'll accept. David's expression softened, the tension of authority and fear melting into something warmer, more human. Good, he said simply. Then let us start from here. Consider this the first step toward a partnership, not just with me, or with my company, but with our family. We have a lot to build, together. Ava's small smile brightened the gray day. See, Liam? Sometimes it's okay to let someone in, she said, her voice carrying a warmth that felt almost tangible amidst the drizzle. Liam nodded, a mixture of relief and disbelief coursing through him. He had acted without expectation, and now, for the first time, he understood that receiving could be as courageous as giving. The moment felt suspended, a fragile yet powerful turning point where pride and humility met, where the muddy park became the threshold to a future he had never dared to imagine. And as he glanced at Ava, at her bright eyes filled with trust, and then toward the man who had once seemed untouchable in wealth and authority, Liam realized something profound. Sometimes, allowing yourself to accept change, even when inconvenient, can open doors that courage alone cannot. The rain had stopped entirely by the time Liam and Ava returned to the Jonas estate, but the memory of the muddy park lingered in their minds like a quiet reminder, the moment that had changed everything. Inside, warmth replaced the chill of the morning, but more importantly, a new sense of possibility had taken root in both of them. Liam's hands, still rough from work and soaked from the park, rested lightly on the wheelchair. Ava's eyes sparkled with a determination that only hardship could forge. It was Ava who first spoke, voice soft but resolute. Liam. I've been thinking. We need a better wheelchair. Something that can go anywhere, mud, sand, even gravel. Something for kids like me. Liam looked at her, mud still clinging to his jacket, and felt the spark of collaboration ignite. Yeah, he said slowly, a small smile tugging at his lips. Something that doesn't get stuck. Something that helps people, not just sits there. And so began the long days of sketches, tests, calculations, and trial and error. They spread papers across the living room floor, notebooks filled with ideas, diagrams, and designs. Ava's perspective, honed by her own experiences, combined with Liam's ingenuity and mechanical aptitude, created a synergy neither could have achieved alone. She suggested modifications to wheels, he calculated balance and leverage. She imagined the freedom of rough terrain, he engineered stability and safety. See, if we adjust the axle here, it won't sink into mud as easily," Liam said, pointing to his hastily drawn blueprint. Ava's eyes lit up. "And if we add these handles, other kids can help push it up hills without hurting their backs." It wasn't just engineering. It was partnership, trust, and empathy made tangible in metal, rubber, and imagination. Each success, a wheel that spun freely, a frame that supported uneven weight, was celebrated quietly, with high fives, laughter, and the occasional triumphant shout that startled the household staff. Each failure, wobbly frames, broken axles, tipping experiments, was met with patience, careful recalibration, and determination to do better. Months passed. 6 months, then a year. Liam thrived at Riverside Academy, balancing schoolwork with his internship at Jonas Enterprises, while still spending evenings with Ava, testing, refining, imagining. He became more confident, less burdened by the weight of poverty that had once defined his life. Ava blossomed too, her confidence growing as her ideas materialized into something extraordinary. Together, they launched Will Beyond, an all-terrain wheelchair designed to tackle landscapes that had once seemed impossible. Even at school, their collaboration carried over into social challenges. Some classmates whispered about Liam being a charity case, and Ava refused to stay silent. "He's not here because of your assumptions," she told the bullies one afternoon, voice steady. "He's here because he's brilliant, brave, and my friend. And if you can't see that, it's your problem, not his." The work they had done in those months extended far beyond mud and machines. It was a forging of character, a shaping of trust, a bond that neither wealth nor poverty could sever. And when Will Beyond won its first award at a National Innovation Expo, recognition came not just for the product, but for the spirit behind it. Awards, letters of praise, and accolades flowed in from cities, countries, even continents, but Liam and Ava kept their focus narrow and true, helping others, supporting each other, and proving that compassion and ingenuity could thrive together. Through the months of collaboration, David observed quietly, learning the lesson Liam had demonstrated in the park. Presence mattered more than presence. Emotional connection mattered more than money. He watched his daughter's eyes light up not because of wealth or privilege, but because someone had truly seen her and worked alongside her to make the world a little better. And in doing so, he began to see the boy who had once been just a rescuer in the mud as something far more, family. It was in those small, muddy victories, in the hours spent tinkering, testing, and dreaming together, that the seeds of transformation took root, both for Ava, who found her voice and courage, and for Liam, who learned that brilliance and compassion could change the world when nurtured and guided by trust and friendship. And for David, witnessing the partnership grow, he began to understand the truth Liam had lived by instinct, that sometimes, the simplest act of kindness could spark a ripple, one that stretched far beyond a single rescue in a muddy park, reaching into lives, families, and communities in ways no wealth alone could achieve. 7 years had passed since that rainy morning in Brookdale Park. The memory of mud, fear, and courage remained vivid for both Ava and Liam, a quiet reminder of the day their lives pivoted. But now, the world they had built together was larger, brighter, and filled with possibilities they could hardly have imagined. Liam Johnson, once a boy exhausted by life's demands, now walked across the stage at MIT, his degree in biomedical engineering clutched firmly in hand. The applause of the crowd washed over him, but it was Ava's smile, wide and genuine from the audience, that resonated most. She was no longer the small, lonely girl stuck in mud, she was a confident, articulate young woman, proud of the work they had accomplished together. Will Beyond had become more than a school project or a solution to one girl's problem. Their design, refined through tireless testing and innovation, had reached 32 countries, helping thousands of children with disabilities navigate terrain previously deemed impossible. From rural villages to urban streets, from muddy fields to sandy beaches, their invention allowed mobility, independence, and dignity. And everywhere, Liam and Ava's names were spoken with gratitude, not as a charity story, but as innovators, as heroes, as friends who had changed the world simply by seeing what others had ignored. Ruth, still vibrant despite the heart condition that had once shadowed her days, watched Liam from the audience with eyes full of pride. She had always known the strength in her grandson, the courage in his heart, but seeing it celebrated on such a scale brought a warmth that made her chest ache with happiness. She leaned slightly toward David, who stood beside her, and whispered, "He's exactly the man I hoped he would become." David, who had once measured love in luxury and presence in material provision, now understood what presence truly meant. The father who had ignored the simple, human moments for 2 long years had learned, through Liam, that family was not defined by blood alone. He had watched, again and again, as Liam's integrity, compassion, and brilliance shaped not only Ava's life but his own. The richest man in the room had discovered the richest truths of all: love, trust, and shared purpose could never be bought. In a quiet moment after the ceremony, Liam, Ava, and Ruth walked together across the campus, discussing the next iteration of Will Beyond, improvements to accessibility, and the global partnerships that awaited them. Their laughter mingled with the breeze, carrying the echo of a journey that began in mud, fear, and indifference. And then, as if the universe wanted to remind them where it all began, Ava asked quietly, "Do you remember the park?" Liam smiled, the memory sharp in his mind: the rain, the mud, the fear, and the boy who had run without hesitation to save a girl nobody else saw. "I'll never forget it," he said. "That's where it all started." Ava nodded, her voice steady and resolute. "And now, maybe we can make sure other people aren't ignored like I was." Liam looked at her, and then at Ruth and David, the family they had become, bound not by circumstance but by choice, by courage, and by care. "We already are," he said. And it was true, the small act of courage that day had rippled outward, transforming not only their lives but countless others. It was the culmination of years of work, trust, and love. It was the proof that compassion, even when inconvenient, had the power to create something extraordinary. And as they paused together, looking toward the horizon, there was a quiet understanding among them all: the world could be changed by a single choice, a single act, a single leap of courage into the rain. Years later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, the same park where it all began lay quiet, leaves swirling in golden eddies across the paths. The air smelled faintly of earth and rain, as if the ground still held memory of that long-ago muddy morning. Ava Jonas, now tall and confident, wheeled herself along the winding trail, her laughter mingling with the soft rustle of trees. Beside her, Liam walked steadily, hand on the wheelchair, guiding her with ease and a calm certainty born from years of partnership. Ahead, a small commotion caught their attention. A homeless man, shivering in the early chill, was being harassed by a group of teenagers. His voice was small, pleading, drowned out by their jeers. The scene mirrored, in a different form, a moment from years before, a moment of fear, of helplessness, of someone ignored when help could have changed everything. Ava's hands tightened on the wheels. She looked at Liam, eyes shining with determination. "I remember what you taught me," she said softly. "We don't ignore people. We don't walk by." Together, they approached. Ava spoke first, voice clear and steady. "Leave him alone. He's a person, just like you, just like me." Her presence carried authority, not through wealth, but through empathy and conviction. Liam stepped in beside her, a silent affirmation, reinforcing the lesson that courage and kindness were inseparable. The teenagers hesitated, unsure of how to respond to the unexpected authority of 2 young people who clearly acted from principle rather than privilege. Slowly, they dispersed, leaving the man unharmed. He looked at Ava and Liam with gratitude, eyes wide and awed, and Ava offered him a gentle smile, one that carried warmth, understanding, and recognition. As they continued along the path, the park now peaceful, Liam glanced at Ava. "You're ready," he said quietly. "You've carried what I once carried, and now you're passing it on." Ava nodded, a small, proud smile curving her lips. "I learned from the best," she replied. "Sometimes, helping someone else, it's like getting a little wet. It changes everything." Liam chuckled softly, the sound rich with memory and satisfaction. "Exactly," he said. And in that moment, standing together in the place where fear and courage had first collided, they understood the depth of their journey. One act of compassion, one leap into the rain, had transformed lives, not just their own, but countless others. David Jonas and Ruth, watching from a nearby bench, exchanged a quiet smile. The family they had formed, unconventional yet unbreakable, had learned that true wealth was not in money or possessions, but in presence, in empathy, and in the courage to act when it mattered most. And as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting golden light across the paths once muddied and treacherous, the lesson lingered in the air. Sometimes, getting a little wet changes everything. One act of kindness, one decision to step forward when others step aside, could ripple outward, shaping futures, forging bonds, and reminding every person who witnessed it that dignity, courage, and love mattered more than anything else in the world. In the park where it had all begun, a girl in a wheelchair and a boy who once had nothing continued to walk, and wheel, into a future defined not by wealth or circumstance, but by compassion, choice, and the quiet, transformative power of one simple act. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.